How bad can you be at your job before you get fired? For example, if your entire job was created to tackle a problem, and then for 4 decades that problem was never solved and it possibly even got worse, would that be a good reason to fire you? That's the situation we currently find the Department of Education in. The main reason the Department of Education was created was to make college more affordable and make primary education better in the United States. How would you say that's going? College costs have exploded since the 80s, and scores in math, science, and literacy are worse than they've been in decades. This seems like as good a time as any to hear Donald Trump say his most famous words to the entire department, "You fired." I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, hello everyone. We have a fun show for you today. We're going to talk about, just a couple things, and then really only one small little thing we're going to do at the end. But our main 2 topics for today, we're going to talk about the Department of Education, as I said in the intro, and we have to talk about that Atlantic article that came out this week about the leaked war plans. And then maybe just briefly, we're going to talk about Snow White right at the end, just for a second. But first, let me get to my favorite comment from last week. My friend David said, quote, "Hate to say Newsom is the Dems' last hope. Haven't had someone as slick as him since Obama," end quote. I agree. I absolutely agree. It's kind of what I was saying last week. The Democrats don't have a ton of great options out there. And so because of that, they're going to look for people like Newsom. And I think Newsom is a strong candidate no matter where he runs. It doesn't matter if he's running for governor or senator or president. He is going to be a strong contender. He is as good a politician as there is in the United States. I think he's terrible. I don't think he is as smart as a lot of people think he is. But he knows how to play the game, and he's very good at just being whatever he needs to be to win. So right now you're watching him kind of try and mold himself as a moderate. He's not a moderate. He is as radical on the left as you could be, but he's going to pretend to win this election, and it might work for him. So you never know. But yeah, I agree. He's definitely a threat to the Republicans' hope of winning the next election. I know it's 4 years from now. We're already going to be talking about it, though. That's just the way it is. So keep an eye on him. Watch what he does. And I don't think he would win today. But it's, as I was saying last week, it is a long time until that election, and a lot of people are going to forget about how bad he was on things like COVID or how bad California is as a state and how the forest management, the fires, his COVID, the loss of economic intake into the state, the amount of businesses and people that have fled California. People might forget these things because if you're slick on camera and you're a great liar, you can be whatever you need to be to win, and he can do that. So anyway, great comment, David, and I absolutely agree with you. Now, let's get on to this first topic. I'm going to do this in reverse order. I know I normally lead with the intro. We get right into that topic, but actually I want to talk about this other thing first, and because I think it was really the thing that dominated the news this week, and that is about the leaked war plans to the Atlantic. For those of you who didn't see the story, let me summarize here briefly. So The Atlantic is a magazine. I don't even know, I really don't know if they do a print copy anymore. It was a magazine, but now it's more of an online journalistic place where people just publish things. And it's very left-leaning. And it's had some good things written in there, but it has a lot of trash, just a lot of terrible things. Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote for The Atlantic. It's got a bunch of just nonsense articles. This week, there was I'll just come out and say it was a giant mistake made by someone in the Trump administration. I don't know if it's 100% been confirmed as to what or who was responsible. We'll get into that in just a minute, but it was a big mistake. Jeffrey Goldberg is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, and he was accidentally included in a group text message with some high-ranking people in the Trump administration while they were discussing plans about an attack against the Houthis. Now, I do have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm going to kind of try and break it down into sections because it's easy to get off into the weeds on a bunch of different topics because you could talk about foreign policy, you could talk about national security, you could talk about the press, we could talk about a number of different things. So I'm going to try and break this down into sections. So here's exactly what happened. It looks like the people from the national security apparatus. So you have a couple of national security advisors, the head of the Department of Defense, you have the vice president. All of these people are in this group message on this app called Signal. And Signal is, there is some talk, we'll get into this just real quick. Signal is an app that allows you to do message people with end-to-end encryption. So the people at Signal don't have access to the messages. They can't get into them. It's basically supposed to be a more secure way to discuss things with people. And the idea is that even Signal itself can't get in there. If the government came and subpoenaed them, they'd be like, well, we don't have access to the messages. That's kind of how the system is built. So the idea is it's a much more secure way of communicating with people. It has been approved. So I saw some controversy here that this is the Trump administration trying to get around some things that they're supposed to do in terms of sunshine law or saving documents. Signal is absolutely approved for national security. You're allowed to do it. There are levels, so anything classified, I believe, you can't take to Signal, but you're allowed to have conversations on Signal. Just like you're allowed to have conversations through text messages, you're allowed to do this. Signal is totally approved. Joe Biden's administration, I believe, approved it. I'm not sure if it existed before Joe Biden, but I know officially Joe Biden had a policy that you could use Signal to talk about things. So ignore that. That's not a real controversy, the fact that they were on Signal. The problem is that whoever created this message or somebody, and it looks like it was possibly Mike Walls, who's the national security advisor. It looks like it was possibly him. They created this thing. They were going to have a discussion. The title of the thread was about the Houthis. It was a small group of people. Somehow, whether it was a staffer who worked for Mike Walls or Mike Walls himself, somebody accidentally included Jeffrey Goldberg into the thread. And this is obviously a bad look because they were having discussions about attacks on the Houthis and shipping and things that are important for national security. They were having these discussions, and they looped in a reporter into these discussions. Now, do I think it's as big of a deal as people are making it out to be? No, because it really wasn't talking about anything that put American lives in jeopardy. It really wasn't. There were no people who were put in jeopardy by the talks that were had on there. It was more of a, should we move forward with this? Should we not move forward with this? Than it is about actual attack plans, war plans. Although they say there are some things, I read through them, there are some things in there that are a little more specific. No American was put in harm's way by this. None. And if that was intercepted, if the Houthis managed to get a hold of that themselves, it wouldn't have put Americans in jeopardy. These are not the kind of attack plans. There was no troops on the ground. You're talking about bombing campaign from very high altitude. No one was in danger by this. But it is a bad look to be so sloppy with a national security issue, which this is obviously a national security issue. You cannot afford to do these kind of things when you're in national security. And so even if, while this reporter was accidentally included, the idea is that it could have been anybody. Now, that's not really true, because in order to be on Signal, you have to make basically a connection, or you have to approach somebody. So it's very unlikely that, for example, you're going to recruit in on Signal the head of the Houthis on accident into your chain and something's going to happen. Now, obviously, Jeffrey Goldberg is not cleared to know any of this in advance, but these aren't the kind of things that wouldn't be reported. So, again, it's a bit exaggerated, but this is sloppy work. And this is the kind of thing that someone should be fired for. It really is. And I'm not picking on Mike Walls. I have no opinion of Mike Walls whatsoever. This is not a bone to pick. I'm not an axe to grind. I do not care who this person is. I don't really know much about him really at all. So, but I'm saying this kind of thing is unacceptable. It is a leak. And though, again, no Americans were put in danger, it is the kind of thing you have to set an example. And this is sloppy. And you can't be sloppy and be one of the top national security officials in the country. It just doesn't work. So someone should be fired. Do I think it's as big of a scandal as the media is making it out to seem? No, I really don't. Again, no Americans were really put in harm's way because of this, and nothing bad happened whatsoever. Again, we're all playing a what-if game. Well, what if? Well, I live in reality, and I don't play what-ifs. What-ifs are useless. And because nothing happened, no, I don't think this is as big of a scandal as people are making it out to be. But, again, there needs to be some accountability, some sort of symbolic gesture, and somebody needs to be fired. Somebody needs to be held accountable. Somebody needs to be fired. because Jeffrey Goldberg is not a friend to the Trump administration. Why? First of all, why is he in your contacts? You don't need to be talking to him. You really don't. And so I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Mike Walls. I don't care if you're Pete Hegseth. I don't care if you're the vice president. You probably don't need to be talking to Jeffrey Goldberg just willy-nilly. Okay? Maybe the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, maybe you get to talk to him for some reason, but just you don't really need to have a discussion with him about things. So I don't know. Anyway, the idea is, by the way, so basically, let's talk a little bit about some specifics here about the text. The idea is they were talking about this group of people, and actually, you know what? We'll go over that in a second. We'll talk about the Houthis in just a second. I want to read what Pete Hegseth put up on X about this, which I thought was actually a great response. He said, by the way, Jonah Goldberg, he wrote an article in The Atlantic about this. He talked about how he thought it was a joke that he was looped into this text message, and then the bombs started falling. That was kind of the headline, loose paraphrase of the headline. And basically, it was everything I've just talked about. He was surprised that he was looped in. He didn't know why, and he thought maybe it was somebody trying to set him up, and then he realized that all these things were really happening in the world, so he said, this is real. At first, I think the administration tried to downplay it, and I'm not sure if they've ever landed on officially confirming it, but I think they did confirm it. I don't know. It's kind of clear. It seems a little hazy at now if they are actually admitting it, but it seems legit. It does. So Pete Hegseth, the leader of the Department of Defense, this is what he had to say, and I think it's a great answer. This is on X. He said, quote, "So let me get this straight. The Atlantic released the so-called war plans, and those plans include no names, no targets, no locations, no units, no routes, no sources, no methods, and no classified information. These are some really shitty war plans. This only proves one thing. Jeff Goldberg has never seen a war plan or an attack plan, as he now calls it, not even close. As I type this, my team and I are traveling the Indo-PACOM region with commanders, the guys who make real war plans, and talking to troops. We will continue to do our job while the media does what it does best, peddle hoaxes." So again, that's Pete Hegseth's response on X. I think it's a good response because it's kind of how I feel about this whole thing. Yes, it's sloppy work. Yes, it's dumb. Yes, it gives an unnecessary scandal to the media to run with. But this is a complete own goal. You don't need to have this conversation. You don't need to have this one-week media cycle of them talking about how the Trump administration is so sloppy and the risks and blah, blah, blah. This is all unnecessary. And so, yes, fire someone because of this. Not Pete Hegseth. Doesn't seem like his fault. Again, whoever added Jeff Goldberg to this, that guy needs to be fired. He really does. And I don't really care who it is. Obviously, it'd be a little complicated if it was the vice president, but it seems like it's Mike Walls. He's a national security advisor. There's plenty of them to go around. Fire him. And that's kind of it as to how I feel about that because, again, I don't think it's the scandal it's made out to be. But the media is, again, it's a complete own goal. You don't need to be doing this. This is not a conversation you need to be having. With the Trump administration, we can say a lot of things. We could say that they are held to an unfair standard when it comes to the media because Donald Trump could make a joke about how, for example, he said, I can't wait to run for my third term, and everyone will run with it like he is serious. He's going to suspend the 22nd Amendment, and he's going to run for a third term, and he'll be dictator for life, and he's held to an unfair standard. But that's the reality. You have to accept it. You can't just complain about it because complaining about something without doing anything, this whinging, this crying, it's not a good look. So you could say, yeah, if this happened under the Obama administration, it would have been treated differently. It would have been treated differently under the Joe Biden administration. It would have been downplayed. It would have been swept under the rug. It would have said, oh, this is dumb, and it would have been one day in the news maybe. But the Trump administration is going to generate clicks, and you're saying, well, it's unfair. Well, I don't care. I don't care if it's unfair. The world's unfair. Get used to it. So Donald Trump says the standards against me are double. They're double standards. Well, you have to be doubly good then. That's just the way it is. You have to be extra careful. You have to be more cautious. You have to do these things. You have to protect yourself against scandal because the world is unfair and the media is going to treat you unfairly. That's the way it is. So anytime there's unnecessary damage in the media, and somebody needs to be held accountable because it's unacceptable. Because Donald Trump, if he's trying to make a successful presidency, has to not generate headlines that make him look bad unless he needs to do those things. Sometimes it's going to be inevitable, but this is not. And so this unacceptable. Mike Walls has to go. That's about it. But the underlying cause of this is something that I think isn't getting talked about at all. The reason why they had this group text is because they're talking about the Houthis. And for those who don't know, this is a terrorist organization. They operate out of Yemen. And they are backed by Iran. They're not our friends. They're not good guys. They do bad things. The first thing, I think it may have been day one when Joe Biden came into office, one of the first things he did was he downgraded the Houthis from a terrorist organization. He took that designation away from them because he was trying to play nice with Iran, and he was trying to do all these things, and ultimately led to the attack on Israel by playing nice with Iran. But this is Joe Biden's doing. The reason why we're having this conversation at all is because the Houthis have shut down shipping through the Suez Canal, and they're attacking the Red Sea. They are trying to control and destroy shipping lanes, and it is having a negative impact on shipping all over the globe. 3% of all U.S. trade goes through the Suez Canal, and I think 40% of all European trade goes through the Suez Canal. So you're talking about by restricting access through these things, you're going to see a massive spike in prices. And this is one of the things in the text that I think didn't get enough coverage this week when it was talking about J.D. Vance in Europe. And J.D. Vance really comes across as an isolationist. He's basically saying, well, this is Europe's problem. Why should we handle it? What are we going to get out of the deal? And I'm not disagreeing with him in totality, but I do think it's short-sighted to say this is Europe's problem. Imagine this. 40% of trade goes through the Suez Canal to Europe. We have I don't know exactly the percentage of our trade off the top of my head that happens with Europe, but if prices rise in Europe, prices rise on goods imported from Europe to America. That's just the way it is. And so I don't think saying, well, that's a European problem. I think if we fix it, Europe should give us something for it, which I agree with that entirely when J.D. Vance says that in these texts. But there's a problem with just saying it's a European problem, let Europe handle it. Europe can't handle it. Europe is incapable of their own defense. That's really what it comes down to. America is, if we want to be the global hegemon, we want to be the only superpower in the world, it's our responsibility to do things like destroy the Houthis. It's really, that's what it comes down to. That's my opinion. My opinion on foreign policy used to be very isolationist. I used to think that 15 years ago. I thought that was a good idea. I do not anymore. Now I believe in American might, and I believe in American muscle. And I think that America, if we want to be the leader in the world, we have to lead. And we do that by crushing people who are hurting the world. And right now, that's the Houthis in Yemen. We should bomb the hell out of them, and that's fine. And that's what we're doing. But let's not forget, these people were empowered under the last administration. They were given money, gave billions of dollars to Iran, who then used it to fund Hezbollah. They used it to fund Hamas. They used it to fund these groups around the globe that are now we are spending more and more money on fighting. Backing Israel, which I think is a good thing, costs us money. Going to fight the Houthis costs us money. Patrolling the shipping lanes in the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, this costs us money. And this is the Biden administration as a continuation of Obama's terrible policy when it came to Iran. So it's important to remember why we're doing these things and why it's important in general, and just beyond the self-goal of a scandal that happened and all the nonsense news that you're going to see generated about it. Anyway, let's move on here. Let's talk about the second topic for the day, which was our intro, talking about the Department of Education. I want to talk just a little bit about the history of the Department of Education, and I'm going to do that. Hold on real quick. Let me do that. Oops. Let me do that 1 second. I'm going to pull up a chart here before I do it. Hold on. Give me 1 sec. Sorry. It's not one to pull up. Oh, my gosh. That was loud. Okay. There we go. Done and done. Okay. So this chart right here that I'm going to show you is very important. So this is a chart on the annual. It says the average annual tuition and fees for public four-year institutions. I want you to keep this chart in mind when I do our little history lesson here. As you can see, this little blue bar is adjusted for inflation, where back in 1969, 1970, the average cost was $2,800, and now we're up to $10,800. And you can see it right here in a little bar graph. 2022 to 2023, public four-year universities, $9,750 in tuition. Private, $35,000. Scroll down here to 63, which was our first year we have, $243 for a public university and $1,000 for a private university. So over here, the math is very easy. We have $35,000. We have a 35 times increase from 1963. And on the other side, do quick math here. So it'll be 4 times 9. We got a 36 times increase, I think is my math there, basically. Going from 2,500 to 10,000, somewhere around there. So we're looking, is that bad math? I got to do math real quick. Hold on. Sorry. I got to do this. It's going to bother me if I don't get that right. Yeah, 10,000 divided by 2. Yeah, about 40. A little less than, but yeah, about 40 times increase. So, and keep that chart in mind, how much the price of college has gone up, because it's one of the 4 goals of the Department of Education. When we're talking history of the department of Education was formed in 1980 by Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter signed it into the law in the previous year. It was formed in 1980. It basically was a split off. They split a couple departments into 2 things. It wound up being the Health and Human Services, and it split off into the Department of Education. So the Department of Education basically started 4 decades ago, 4.5 decades ago, really. And it was started with 4 goals in mind. Okay, so one was establishing financial aid for education and distributing those, as well as monitoring the funds. So what it's doing is giving financial aid to make college more affordable to people, and it would distribute and monitor those funds. It would collect data on America's schools and disseminating research. Number 3 was focus national attention on key issues in education and make recommendations for education reform. And number 4, prohibiting discrimination and ensuring equal access to education. Okay, so those 4 pillars are the things that the Department of Education is supposed to be doing. Do we feel like they have done those things well and those things have gotten better? We could take them one by one. Has federal financial aid made higher education more affordable? Let's do it one more time before we make our determination. Let's just look at the chart. Look at the chart. Okay, here, this year, right here, the beginning of the chart, this is when the Department of Education, right here, this chart right here, where it's kind of relatively low. This is where the Department of Education was formed with the explicit goal of making college more affordable. Up. Right here is where we wound up 2 years ago. Okay? Take the pandemic out of it. Go back a couple years. Okay, this is pre-pandemic. It was even higher in the adjusted for inflation, pre-pandemic. So do we feel like that pillar, the first pillar, is going well? No, obviously not. The cost of college has gone up. Now, you can argue that the cost of everything has gone up, and I would say, yeah, that's true. It is true. Inflation has has made everything rise. But that means the department's not doing its job well, because adjusted for inflation, it is not doing well, even when you try and take that into account. It's gone up, again, 35 to 40 times between private and public, depending on what you're looking at. So no, it's not doing that well. And part of this is caused by the unlimited federal funds that we poured into education with the idea that everyone needed to go to college. This is obviously not true. Not everyone needs to go to college. I'm of the opinion that way less people need to go to college. College is mostly useless. And in society, we're doing ourselves a disservice by sending every person to college, because college, basically, it's become instead of educating people, college has become a place where you can credential people. And there's a big distinction between that, because if you're going to college to get educated, you're going to be an engineer or a doctor, you're going to work in STEM, it makes sense to me. If you're going to college to get a gender studies degree, you are getting a credential to say, look, I'm smart enough to achieve a bachelor's or a master's or a doctorate. But it's all nonsense. You're not getting any smarter. You're just getting a piece of paper that says you're a certain amount of smart. So I think that they have failed. They have failed to make higher education more affordable. And a lot of this is because when you want to send every kid to college, the federal government basically just subsidizes this industry. So imagine, it's the same thing that happens with healthcare. You have an unlimited budget, basically. It's not unlimited, but in terms of colleges, it kind of feels that way. Because you have if little Timmy, the orphan, is going to go to college, I have to look at him and I have to figure out, okay, little Timmy, I obviously can't charge little Timmy $10,000 a semester because it doesn't work. But then little Timmy has a granddaddy, Daddy Warbucks, who says, hey, I have an unlimited pocketbook. And then I look at him and I say, well, but, little Timmy, if we'd get a great education, if you would just write me a big blank check. And that's kind of the federal government. The federal government is Daddy Warbucks, who has an unlimited pocketbook, and the cost of college has gone up because they know on the other end of the bargaining table is the federal government, who doesn't care about spending money. They just want to send the kids to college, which is a great and aspirational goal, but it's not helping, and it's not making anything cheaper. So this problem is caused by unlimited federal funds, and instead of having the opposite effect of what they intended, which is to lower costs, they have raised the cost substantially, more than when adjusted for inflation, without a doubt. So no. Step one, no. Step two, collecting data on schools, or pillar two, collecting data on schools. Okay, maybe. I don't know. I don't know enough about it. Maybe they do. Maybe they do a great job of collecting data on schools. I know that there's standardized tests that we all have to give out, and I know everything is great and wonderful and good. So, yeah, maybe they collect data on kids, so maybe pillar two is going great. All right, so 1 for 2. The issue is, what do they do with this data? What is the point? They have data. Okay, what has been done with it? Because issue number 3 is educational reform. And this clearly the Department of Education is failing on. And I say that because the program for international student assessment, which measures 80 countries, found that there are 5 systems in the world with higher reading scores than the United States. There are 25 countries with higher math scores and 9 with higher science scores. Now, this sounds like, okay, we're kind of in the mix, but those numbers are not great. Our math, being 25th in math, off the top of your head, can you name 25 countries that should be better than us in education, in math? And in this 5 systems with higher reading scores, well, we now, and you can't attribute this to the Department of Education, except you kind of can, our COVID losses are greater than other countries. Why? Because we kept schools closed longer, so our scores have fallen in proportion to other countries. These international student metrics have gone down. They're going down. They're heading in the wrong direction, especially in math and especially with science. We are going down compared to other countries, and we're just doing poorly. And our spending per student is outrageous. The amount of money that we spend in the federal government for the Department of Education per student dwarfs other countries, and we don't get the return of investment. We're not getting the ROI of this money. The budget of the Department of Education in 2024 was $250 billion. It was only $94 billion 15 years ago, in 2010. A 165% increase over 14 years. Well, why is this? What is that money going towards? What is it doing? We haven't gotten better in the last 14 years, but our budget has increased 165% for this department. Have we gotten smarter in the last 14 years? The answer is obviously no, especially when you consider that we shut down schools for years during COVID during that time. And yet, people insist that this department is doing a good job and it's necessary. This department is beholden to the teachers' unions. That's what it is. It's a money funnel. That's what was happening during COVID. They kept the schools closed during the pandemic, funneled money to teachers. I like teachers. I think teachers are great. I thought the closing of schools was nonsense. I said that from the beginning, from the very beginning. And the Department of Education helped facilitate that. And it was a bad call, and it was the wrong call. And so what do you say, what does the Department of Education do well? Because public schools are failing. No one wants to send their kid to school in the inner city. Everyone wants to send them to private schools, which are not beholden to the Department of Education. So our charter schools, or they want school choice. Public schools are failing. It's not because of teachers, by the way. This is not really a teacher problem, though I think there are issues with teachers in some areas. I think that this is a Department of Education problem. It's a problem that because if you want federal money, you have to conform to a curriculum that you might not agree with or want to teach. For example, that new math that came out a few years ago, what was it they were doing? Common Core. Common Core is just a garbage thing that was forced down the throats of schools by the federal Department of Education. This is nonsense. This is bad things. There are things that the Department of Education might do well. Okay? I don't know. Maybe racism in schools has gotten better. I don't know. I don't know how racist it was in the 80s. I wasn't alive. So I can't really say. I know that if you think you need the Department of Education to enforce racial codes on schools, I think that's silly. I went to school, okay? I went to a giant public school. My whole life I've gone to public school. I never went to private school. There were 2,500 kids in my high school. You know what I didn't see a lot of? Racism. Now, I know it was a crazy time, the early 2000s, but it really is not. I don't know why the Department of Education would be needed to combat racism in schools. I don't really see a lot of racism in our educational system at this particular juncture, 2025. The one thing that they do, and I will say I like this, is I understand that the one good thing the Department of Education does is the free lunch program. Okay, that's good. I actually think that that's kind of a decent program. I do. Do we need the Department of Education to do that? No. I think it's time we get rid of this department. We really just shut it down. You don't need it. It's not as though the federal Department of Education is making sure kids are educated. It's not. Just take it back to the states. Let states educate their children the way that they deem appropriate. Let schools have more control over how their money is used, and I think this would be a benefit to everyone. I'm not against education. Look behind me, okay? Look behind me. Just take a look. Look at all the books. I love reading. I love learning. A lot of these on this shelf in particular, a lot of those are novels, but many of these are not. Most of what I read is not fiction. It's nonfiction. I love learning things, and I think that it's important to be educated. So I'm not saying that schools are bad. I'm saying the Department of Education doesn't make people smarter, and that's its goal. That should be its explicit goal. And just like I'm saying college doesn't make people smarter, you should have more control over how you choose to educate your children, and what state you live in should be in charge of that. That's what I believe. So get rid of this department. Let Donald Trump say his famous words, and I don't think anything terrible is going to happen. I really don't. I think that it'll be fine. But people just get so, I don't know, they're so upset. Anyway, we'll see. I want to know what people think, because I could be totally off here. You never know. I'm wrong about things sometimes. Once in a blue moon, every once in a while, I can get one wrong. So if I'm wrong, tell me. Let me know in the comments. I really want to hear why. I would love to hear a good, full-throated defense of the Department of Education and what I'm missing as to why this is a valuable institution. Now, before we go, I don't really want to talk about this movie. I am elated, overjoyed to see how terrible this Snow White movie has done. I have said, we talked about Disney recently, so I don't want to go into a whole Disney thing, but I want to read a couple headlines about the review of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I don't care for the lead actress. Gal Gadot, she's great. Probably the most beautiful person in the entire world, Hollywood-wise at least, like actresses. She's great. She's awesome. And I felt bad that she's in this movie, because the other one, the lady who plays Snow White, Rachel Ziegler, is terrible. I just want to read a couple headlines from reviews that made me smile today. So, a little schadenfreude. Lazy, visually repellent. That's from The Independent. Exhaustingly awful from The Guardian. Disney has trashed its reputation. The Times. A strange hot mess. HuffPost. Listless. Screen Daily. Good enough for TV. Vanity Fair. Film has a major identity crisis. BBC. Those are not conservative outlets, people. Okay? Those are just places that did not care for this movie, and I find that hilarious. And it goes to show, listen, I keep saying this. I don't know. And maybe people will learn one day that I'm right about some things. As I just said, I was wrong about some things. I'm right about some things. If you own a business, a corporation, or you're producing a movie or whatever, shut up about divisive issues. And I mean this. And I'm not just saying that. I'm saying if I was a sports, in sports there's not even as good of a metric. But it's that Michael Jordan answer. Why don't you talk about politics? And he says, Republicans buy sneakers. The idea that if you're a movie star, you should get out there with your hot takes people are not going to like that, and you're going to sabotage yourself. This chick, she might be a great singer. I don't know. I never saw West Side Story. I don't really plan on watching Snow White. I hear she's a good singer, but no one cares. Your movie just bombed. It is doing terribly in the reviews. It's got a 1.6 on IMDb. And yeah, some of that's probably review bombing, but those are not review bombs. Those are major publications that have just reviewed your movie and said it is terrible. And a lot of this just has to do with the unnecessary controversy that you surrounded yourself with. And you did that. And it's the same with corporations. When you get out there and you preach about divisive issues, people just don't want to use you. I tell people all the time, I don't want to get my morality from my soap company or from my shampoo company or from the place where I buy shoes. Shut up. Sell me the thing that I want. Like I used to buy Aveeno soap. I used to have a thing of Aveeno body wash. And I said, oh, when it runs out, I'm not going to buy more. Why? Because they felt the need to put a 3-year-old boy in a dress on their commercial. And I said, well, this is weird. I don't like this. And I don't know why you would do this or why you would sell soap using a 3-year-old dressed up like a princess. Using a 3-year-old boy dressed up like a princess. I thought it was weird. And so I don't need to buy Aveeno. It was the same thing that happened with Bud Light. And it's the same thing that's happening with Snow White. People don't want to go if you're going to belittle them or talk down to them or say nasty things. And again, I could go through all the things that Rachel Ziegler said that I don't like, but it doesn't matter. It's not the point. The point is it's hilarious because you did it to yourself. There was no reason this movie needed to bomb as bad as it did. And it's because of Disney and who they choose to market. And also, stars need to understand, like, that lady bears this responsibility. Rachel Ziegler bears the responsibility for this film bombing. And what will happen is they'll turn around and say, well, it's just all the racists out there who didn't like a Latina as Snow White. No, it's really not. It's not that at all. It's because you're insufferable. And that's why people don't want to go see you. It's not because, and then your only defense is you just call everyone racist. Okay, well, we'll see how it works when your movie bombs. It's not because a bunch of people don't like Mexicans or Latino. I don't know where she's from. Don't like Hispanics. So it's just nonsense. Anyway. Little happy news for the day. We're going to leave it there. As always, questions, comments, concerns, people, leave them down in the comments below because I always love to hear from people. I always try and respond to people in the comments, especially on YouTube where most of the stuff gets seen these days. YouTube or Rumble. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there for the week, and I will catch you guys next Friday.